Hello everyone. Today I am talking about chapters 3, 4 and 5, part 2 of The Queen's Play by Dorothy Dunnett. I know that's a lot of chapters, but it's because 2 of them are short and I couldn't stop reading. So what happens in these chapters? So we have the opening scene, which is where Margaret is being like, I can't deal with Lymond here in France. Please send help. She's writing a letter to Tom. And then we have just a little Dunnett style montage of like what's been happening and what it's like for Lymond and his fallout after losing his dog Ludus, and what Lymond is doing, because this whole time Lymond isn't actually allowed to go to French court. He is just like chilling by himself, but he does have lots of visitors apparently. And the room that he shares with Lymond, I don't know what about his like manservant, Peter Dooley? Is he also in that room? I'm gonna say yeah, he is, because why would the servant have his own room? So there's 3 of them in this one room. 1 bed, 3 men. Okay. Lymond is like totally all prideful about Lymond at this point because Taddy Boy can talk. Yeah, well. Can you imagine the conversation initially between Lymond and Lymond where Lymond is like, so I kind of want to go undercover to France and I'm thinking I should be in your retinue, and Lymond is like, well, I already have a servant, what would your role be? And Lymond's like, the bard. Lymond is now realizing why that happened. Love this line. It says, this is on page 129, Taddy Boy could talk and he was a pet of a listener as well, which is just so lovely because some people talk a lot and never listen, and some people just listen and don't really add to the conversation, which is like almost equally as annoying. But Lymond does both. He knows the value of listening and he knows the value of talking and entertaining. So I really like that line. He has successfully seduced the entire French court, according to Dorothy Dunnett, but Dunnett was always going to have Lymond seduce the French court. His playing had become as fashionable as a drug. He made music in public and private for them all. He hardened his long fingers in their entrails of icing and sugar and started to twist. So to me, this is like Lymond is basically holding their hearts in his hand, and he now controls exactly how fast all of their hearts are going to be beating, and he can twist it if he wants. So that's just such a beautiful line. How did she think of writing this? Okay. Do you guys ever sometimes just chill in your usual day-to-day lives and you remember that time that Lymond tucked Will Scott into bed, where 4 hours prior he was whipping the skin off another man's back? Do you ever just think about that with a great concern? I do. I screamed at the pages on page 130. I screamed because Lymond is... I have many issues. So the thing is that Lymond's bringing people back to the shared room of Lymond and Taddy Boy and Peter Dooley, and locking them out because he's doing stuff. Okay. Lymond gets locked out and hears a woman's voice and also a man's voice. So okay, I have multiple issues here. The first is, why the hell would Lymond invite them back to his room and not go to their room? Because his room is clearly shared and probably not as nice as their room in like whatever palace they're all living in. It's like, if someone is in a tent and someone has a house and the person's like, well, let's go to the tent, that makes so much more sense. Oh, by the way, my family also live in the tent with me. What? Why are they going back to Tatty Boys? So, is he having sex with these people? Like, I want to say yes. But, like, I'm sorry. I can't get over the fact that he has a beer gut. So, I'm imagining Tatty Boy as this disgusting, filthy creature with, like, greasy black hair, always dirty, always smelly. I mean, is he washing this fake gut that he has? No, he's not, okay? How can he wash it? Who's washing it for him? Peter Dooley? Hey Peter, can you just wash my beer gut? It needs to be dry by morning. If Lymond is fucking half the people he's bringing back, let's just say he's leaving his clothes on. Let's just remind ourselves that, you know, oral sex was invented in France, wasn't it? Let's pretend it was. It definitely probably wasn't. But let's just pretend that that's what a lot of that is happening. So clothes don't necessarily have to be entirely removed. My mind will never move on from this particular page. Never, ever. This is haunting me for many years. But let's move on here or we'll never get past it. Robin Stewart is like getting to the point where he's like realizing how cool and talented Tatty Boy is, and now wondering, though he's not smart enough to suspect anything is weird, but he's wondering, why stay with O'Liamro? Look how much talent you have, look how much you are controlling, like with puppet strings, everyone in the French court. Why stay with O'Liamro? If Robin was a little bit smarter, he'd be like, why does O'Liamro have such a talented bard in the first place? But it's okay because it's Robin, so he doesn't suspect such things. Robin admits that he's chilling here with all these people just because Tatty Boy is still there. For Robin to admit that is such a lovely thing about Robin, because that's a very humbling thing for a person to say. It's like, I'm literally here because you're still here. Like, that takes a lot of bravery. But also, I was really pissed off at Robin in the last chapter for being... Why are Robin and O'Liamro, who are both characters that I love, but they just don't see eye to eye, because O'Liamro is not upset by anything, much, really, and Robin is the opposite. He's so neurotic and upset by the smallest slights on his ego that he can't deal with life. But both of them, deep down, I think are good people. Such a shame. Lymond is just like, ugh, for fuck's sake. Why do I have to deal with you both? Here we go. So Lymond then says to Robin, well, I think you should leave. Because of me, I think you should leave. This was heartbreaking because, and I'll talk about this a little bit in a tick when I get to another bit, Lymond is protecting Robin Stewart by asking Robin to leave, because I think Lymond knows that shit's gonna go down, and Robin is the sort of expendable character who could get caught in the crossfire. Like, no one's really gonna care if he dies, as sad as that is, and Lymond knows that. And so Lymond is like, GTFO, like, go away. Like, you, in the nicest possible way, like, it's like that. I think that's Tatty Boy trying to protect Robin Stewart, is by saying you should go. This chapter was great because Lymond and O'Liamro go to visit freaking John Lennox. So D'Aubigny's big ass house in France, castle, whatever you want to call it. And it was so funny. Funny because George Douglas is there, and as soon as he was there, I was like, yes, bro. I feel like every conversation leads to a little heart-to-heart between Lymond and George Douglas, and I live for this shit. I live for it. Because of that, I really love George Douglas. He's such an interesting character because he's so heartless, but also like funny in that way. So first, George is just like baiting Lymond by being like, have you read Pinson, The Art and Craft of Know Well to Die? Die spelled T-Y-E. But O'Liamro is smart and he totally gets the reference, and he's just like... A grin of pure joy lined the smooth, egg-round face, and the Prince of Barrow addresses his olive over his shoulder. Busy child, you've surely read that. Oh my god. This is bad though, because after this bait by George Douglas, like hinting to Lymond that he knows who Lymond is, because Olimro then turned back and said to Taddy Boy, oh, surely you've read that, George now must suspect that Olimro knows who Lymond is, because Olimro was like continued on with the bait. So that's an admission that is not great, and I reckon Lymond was probably annoyed at that. But Lymond's comeback, or Taddy Boy's comeback, was the Douglases are experts on titles. I would never contradict them. I think he means like not book titles but land titles, and the Douglases are really good at like just, you know, making the right marriages to get all the titles that they want. Which is basically Lymond saying to George Douglas, I know that you know who I am, just shut up. But of course, and there's that moment where George actually like grabs Lymond's hand and like pins it somewhere. I screamed. It's so intimate. A hand came down sharply and silently on his wrist, pinning it onto the rich wood where those flexible fingers, the way that Lymond's hands are described, flexible fingers, lay exposed in relief. And then George Douglas says, don't you sometimes regret that something like that can't be bought? Or can it, I wonder? This is exactly like back in Game of Kings, where George Douglas is like, I want to put a collar and chains on Lymond. And now he's just like trapped Lymond's hand and says, I still want to buy you. Can I buy you? Although I think he was referring to, has Lymond's services been bought by the Dowager Queen? But also George Douglas is still totally like, I want this guy underneath my command. Oh my god, this borderline BDSM stuff between George Douglas and Lymond is always going to get me. And I know it's all in my head, I get it, but I swear it's not. And then George pulls Lymond into another room and is like, okay, Francis Crawford of Lymond, let us talk. So he's now coming out into the open and they have a fantastic talk where George is he's just trying to get more power, basically. Well, they start off having a chat. Just about the general situation of what's going on with Scotland and Queen Mary's apparent danger. And it's really funny because George is like trying to spell it out for Lymond, like saying this is the situation, and Lymond is just like looking at George being like, do I look like I need you to spell out the situation? He's like, do you tell me? It's like, George, what are you trying to tell Lymond? Lymond knows, he gets it. I just needed this conversation between George Douglas and Lymond so much earlier in the book, but I'm so glad we've got it. We find out here that, this is from George Douglas speaking. The king has his favourites, St. Andre, Condé and Dengen. These are the three courtiers. The absent Vidame, I'm so excited to meet Vidame. I'm suspicious of him. Each in turn hates his or her rival. Nearly all without exception hate the de Guises. So everyone hates the de Guises, but the king loves the de Guises. Okay. And then there's this moment where like Lymond is kind of daydreaming and George is like, are you listening to me? And Lymond is essentially like, yes, I'm doing everything that the Queen wants me to do. What else must I do? And George is like, you must dance, because George wants to use Lymond to get more power, and basically says that to Lymond, I want to be the next ambassador to France, next Scots ambassador to France, and if you do not put me forward, I am going to basically say who you are and that you are a spy pretending to be an Irishman, and that is going to seriously damage the Queen Mother. Good luck with that. And Lymond is just like clocking this over, and he's like, well, George Douglas would never actually do that because that would also be not to his benefit. Like if the Queen Dowager was reduced in preference in the king's eye, that would hurt all of Scotland, including Sir George's standing with the king. So, which means that Sir George would never then get the to be ambassador anyway. So it's an empty threat here because and Lymond knows that immediately and calls the bluff, which is very clever, because I didn't get that. I was like, when I was reading this, I was like, oh my god, Lymond's gonna have to like now work for Georgia Douglas. But I was like, oh, of course it's a bluff. Like, of course it is. And so Lymond calls the bluff and basically just starts walking away, and George is just like, well, it was worth a shot. And I love this line here on page 136. They understood each other. It's like they both understand that they're both quite intelligent, that they both are going to use each other to get what they want. But there's not like overt animosity or like desire to hurt the other one. I think both of them just like the fact that the other is a piece on their chessboard. And I just love this dynamic between them. There is so much chemistry between George Douglas and Lymond. There's a brilliant line because Lymond knows that Sir George would take just as much as he could snatch this side of danger. So that is to say that Sir George is really good at like pushing the boundaries, but he'll never do anything that would actually put his life or his belongings in a worse off position. So yeah, but George is just kind of annoyed. You deserve the 7 degrees of self-confidence. You deserve to be made a little uncomfortable, my friend. Lymond then shoots back a line, which is really interesting. And I think these are the lines that are easily overlooked by a lot of people when they read this. But I'm not going to overlook it today. So Lymond says this is his parting line with his conversation with George Douglas. I will add a true piece of advice. The country is stronger than the Lord, and equal to the power of her songs. Do you sing now? I think what Lymond is saying here to George is that it's more than just politics. The country has a heart, and if you win certain hearts, you will be, it doesn't matter if you win the titles or the names, if you have the heart of a country, that is the true core of power. And it says straight after this that Sir George did not sing. So George never goes for trying to sway people by emotions in a good way. He's always trying to just move chess pieces around to his advantage instead. But what does this say about Lymond, like about Taddy Boy? That he said this, Lymond has this deep understanding that no matter who's in title or who's in power or what, country will hold together no matter who's in power. And Lymond is probably less interested in having certain people in power and more interested in the integrity of the nation itself. And I think this is in keeping with my vision of Lymond's political views, trying to work for the greatness of a cohesive nation and not necessarily of a particular person in power. So I don't think Lymond has a particular desire for Queen Mary of Scots and the Dowager Queen to remain to keep power over the Earl of Arran, who is like the rival power person in Scotland. I think he's more interested in who is better for the nation and will probably throw his support behind them. Like, who will look out for the best of Scotland herself. A nation is equal to the power of her songs and not the nobles. There's a lot of ways that can be interpreted really, but that's how I've kind of interpreted that. And that's really quite crucial, I think, to Lymond's philosophy. So throughout this entire time that they've been chatting, Taddy Boy has like taken a mask that represented Quetzalcoatl. There's so many allusions to different gods. We've had like Dionysus and like so many. We had Asmodeus at one point, back in Game of Kings, and we had Janus recently as well. Maybe that's coming up in this chapter, I can't remember. And Quetzalcoatl has so many allusions to gods throughout, like ancient gods throughout this entire book. I am confused as to how someone in the 16th century knows about Quetzalcoatl, because this is an Aztec or Mayan god. Had that information got across to Scotland? How did Lymond learn of it? I suppose that rich people in France would have liked to collect masks of gods of like exotic places, I suppose. It makes sense. But anyway, Lymond puts this mask on. Quetzalcoatl is apparently like an Aztec god of creation. Also, I was looking at this on Wikipedia. Quetzalcoatl seems to have like multifaceted aspects, like many faces, and we also get here that the mask is Janus-like. He claps the mask on, Janus-like, back to front, and surveyed Sir George, who had risen not quite so smoothly. George is just like, kind of annoyed at Lymond. I love how Lymond always wins these exchanges. But anyway, in my like book of ancient Greek and Rome, Janus, the Roman god of gateways and beginnings. Hence our word for the month that begins the year, January, the beginning month. He was represented with two faces, each seen in profile, the one that looks back, the one that looks forward. So this is, if we are having Quetzalcoatl, who is the creator god, plus Janus, who is the god of beginnings and also like two-faced, what the hell is this implying about Lymond? Dorothy Dunnett is like putting a symbol on Lymond of a new beginning. So yeah, it's an interesting representation. I'd be interested to see how you guys have interpreted the representation of Janus and Quetzalcoatl in this particular chapter. Although I am aware that many of you have read all of the books, so it might be easier for you looking back, so please be careful what you say. So then we have, they're just chilling at this place with D'Aubigny, and George Douglas now keeps dropping like hints that in front of O'Liam Rowe about Lymond, and O'Liam Rowe is just loving getting all this information about Lymond from George Douglas. Clearly George is like, oh okay, definitely O'Liam Rowe knows who Lymond is. Lord D'Aubigny listened almost without comment and only once contradicted. The fellow's yellow-headed, surely, the same as my brother. That's why my dear Matthew found it infuriating when Margaret broke up. So Lord D'Aubigny, I really can't say that he is the bad guy here, because for him to make that comment, if Lord D'Aubigny was really trying to get at Lymond, I don't think he would have said something so careless as that, unless he's extremely smart and just trying to play with everyone. But for me, this line here of Lord D'Aubigny, like, kind of sort of almost embarrassing his niece, well, Margaret Lennox, and showing how pissed he was at Lymond, makes me think that he is not the bad guy. Because then why would... Everyone's still assuming that if Lymond is around, he's O'Liam Rowe and not Taddy Boy. Why would D'Aubigny say that in front of O'Liam Rowe, who's sitting right there with his golden hair? Thing is that this happened with Andrew Hunter, where I was so convinced he was nice because he was so kind to Mariota. I don't know. And we always knew that Lymond never liked Andrew Hunter throughout the entire book, and for good reason. And we've had this explicitly stated that Lymond doesn't like Lord D'Aubigny. So is he the bad guy? I don't know. It's just like, it's just such a stupid thing for him to say. The fellow's yellow-headed, surely. Like, if you're going after Lymond, you gotta know what he looks like. Or are you just like playing stupid? George is like, yellow hair can be dyed, John. They say the man is now in France. Lymond must just be wanting to murder George. Just absolutely murder. And O'Liam Rowe was like, When Robin then confronts Taddy Boy about, oh, because Robin Stewart is there as well, your prince was awful interested in this fellow Lymond. Clearly, Robert is trying to get underneath Taddy Boy's skin by saying, hey, you're not the favoured one. I just wonder if Lymond is really feeling shitty about how much he is deceiving Robin Stewart at this point, because this friendship that they're developing is going to be completely ruined upon well, it has to eventually go because he can't be Teddy Boy forever. And that's going to just destroy all trust in all of this goodness that Robin Stewart is finding in himself in knowing Teddy Boy, and all of these personal changes is built upon a lie. And when that lie is revealed, it could completely take Robin Stewart back to where he began at the beginning of the book, when he was just like super egoic and neurotic. And that's why Lymond's like, go away, go back to Scotland. I hope Lymond can rectify this and come out to Robin Stewart one-to-one before Lymond's personality, Lymond's real character is revealed, real identity is revealed, I should say. I hope that Teddy Boy can go up to Robin Stewart and say, there's something you need to know, and I'm telling you this because I trust you. That would really be great for Robin, rather than Robin finding out third hand and then Lymond in his terrible way, and I know he would do this, going up to Robin and just like shrugging and being like, that's what it is, and that would just so totally wreck Robin. Because people like Robin Stewart, despite their flaws, I feel like they have a lot of potential because there's the diligence and dedication there, whereas Lymond, who's probably an easier person to get along with, doesn't have any ambition, and it's so hard to cultivate ambition. Now, this was a bit of a shock to me at the end of chapter 3, so on page 138. Lymond starts to get pissed off at Lymond, and this is like shaking my whole faith. I'm like, this cannot happen. Lymond has to stay on Lymond's side. How I've read this is that like Teddy Boy is shining, and also among the Irish, everyone likes Teddy Boy, and Lymond is finally starting to get kind of annoyed at that. I don't know why, because I thought that he wouldn't care about any of this, and he consistently has not cared about politics and his standing in this whole book. And he says here to Lymond, it would be great saving for everyone, would it not, if you passed a little time on your own affairs before you came interfering with mine. So I think he's saying, butt out of the Irish stuff. Go away, like, this is not your area. And Teddy Boy is so shocked. Because I honestly don't think Lymond is meaning to step on Lymond's toes. He's just being like typical Lymond, and when you are standing next to Lymond in a room, it's really hard for people to not look at Lymond. Like, they're not going to be looking at you if you're standing next to Lymond. If you want to take cover, stand next to Lymond. No one will notice you. And that's what's happening to Lymond. But then Lymond is like super nice, because he's like thinking, oh my god, I am kind of annoying Lymond. And he adds indulgently, but to take heed to the luck of another, Prince of Barrow, 'tis a true friend you are. So Lymond is, being kind back to Lymond still at this point. But Lymond is just like, I'm happy you think so. Which is not passive aggressive at all. So chapter 4 of part 2, a bunch of small things happen. So I'll just quickly go through what I found interesting. For starters, Lymond, Robin Stewart and Teddy Boy leave the Daubigny residence, and the leaving is described as tired of walking in the frosty labyrinths and exchanging stale barbs around high fires of rosemary and juniper. So basically, like, they keep on like kind of exchanging barbs behind their identities between like Lymond, Teddy Boy, George Douglas. Oh, Lymond must have hated being there at Daubigny's residence. Hated it. And George Douglas was there. He was like, screw my life. We basically get another little montage where we find out that Teddy Boy is so loved that he's basically undoing all of the damage that Lymond did to the king. Lymond gets summoned to the queen, the Dowager Queen, and that's not really much happens there. Lymond once again says that the liberty of mind and annulment of convention and a fine carefree richness of excesses itself sets the soul whirling and soaring. This is how I always pictured Lymond. He's like, be free, this is how we be who we are. Right? I mean, it's easy for Lymond to say this because he's obviously born to richness, but anyway. So yeah, Lymond, correct. Keep thinking like this. This is this is true, okay? But then there's this little doll in a cabinet that is torn apart. Its head is lolled to the side. What the hell is this representing? Well, I first thought that someone had given to the Queen Dowager a doll with red hair that looked like it was dead to represent someone, as a warning that someone was trying to kill Queen Mary. But that can't be right, because why would they have it on display in a cabinet? What the hell is this doll about? If it's a spoiler, don't tell me, but what on earth was this rag doll about? Was it that Lymond is catching on to the fact that, you know, well, why is Lymond here? And Lymond must be here because Lymond is trying to protect a little girl from dying, in which case Lymond might be finally realizing that his own life is in danger by being close to Lymond. That's another way that it can be interpreted, but I'm not sure. Now, Una O'Dwyer is someone that I'm really not understanding, but we finally get a little bit of a scene with her and Lymond. Basically, Lymond confronts her and says, why the hell are you here? You could have had like any Irishman, marry any Irishman back in Ireland. Why are you coming here? And basically Una shows her ambition. She's not in Ireland because she realized that Ireland is kind of backwater and she wants to be in a place where she can actually do something and use her mind, I assume. And this is a huge problem because Lymond is literally the opposite. He is here to not get involved in politics and continue to just live a life of whatever the hell he wants to do. And Una proves that not only is she ambitious, but she also understands and knows a lot about politics and tries to incite Lymond into caring, but Lymond is just like, good luck with that. Like, you've got no chance of making me want to be ambitious or want to fall in with these politicians and sell my soul. This is Lymond's idea of like politics, is that it's bad and you don't want to be in it, which it has its own weaknesses because of course you can continue to have that attitude but you'll never effect change. Then Lymond admits that the reason he's staying in France is to continue to be around Una and present her with 7 hounds with chains of silver and a golden apple so that you will think of me. So he's clearly putting himself forward, like propositioning her. And Una's just like, no, I've got enough dogs and I have enough lovers. But what about friends? Lymond says. So clearly, like, Una is like this martyr of a woman who's like, I don't need friends. You can't come near me. I'm going to hurt you. So very much like Lymond. And what we know about Una is that, like, there was a chapter, a few chapters ago, it's pretty clear that Una suspects that Lymond isn't Irish. Like, we know that. Taddy Boy isn't Irish, sorry. She definitely suspects he's an imposter. I don't think Una knows that he is Francis Crawford of Lymond, but knows that Taddy Boy Bella isn't from Ireland, and that perhaps because of that, she's looking down on Lymond. Like, because if Lymond has bought with him a spy, but isn't involving himself and just letting the spy do whatever he wants, it's kind of like Una must be thinking, what is in this guy's head? Like, he's clearly allowed someone to come with him who's trying to affect political change, but doing nothing himself. It does seem a little strange. Like, if I was Una, I would be not impressed at Lymond regarding that. Though one cannot help but be impressed with Lymond's laid back attitude and not being bothered by much. But you kind of can't have one with the other, can you? That because he's laid back and not bothered, he has no ambition. Whereas, you know, for example, Francis is the opposite. He is definitely not laid back, but has a ton of things he wants to do. It is a personality clash here between them. And anyway, they finally get to a conversation where Lymond was like, do you love me? And Lymond interrupts them. But Lymond didn't actually know he was interrupting at that point because he was outside. So they're doing this stupid rooftop chase. I rolled my eyes at this idea. I'm sorry, but I really did. So Lymond is now pissed off at Lymond, 100%, probably because emotionally he's pissed off that his moment was interrupted with Una. But he's also just pissed off at Lymond for what happened in the previous chapter, which is to say, he just feels like Lymond's stepping on his toes a little bit much. It just still seems kind of weird and out of character for Lymond. But people are complicated. And so Lymond promises to have a chat with Taddy Boy later about clearly their situation. Which Lymond kind of shrugs off at the time, but we find out later at the end of chapter 5 that Lymond is freaking out about this. Like, Lymond's heart is beating right now, finding out that Lymond is pissed off, and that Lymond has come up to Lymond. It's like, we need to talk. Yeah, this is not good for Lymond. At the time, I didn't read too much into this. I was still getting confused why Lymond was so pissed off, but I suppose I can make some sense of it, but it just still feels like out of the blue. And anyway, so this stupid rooftop chase begins. I don't mean to call it stupid, but I do, because I just find it ridiculous. And I agree with Una that it would be an excellent idea if they all broke their necks. These people destroying the rooftops, waking up people in the middle of the night for entertainment. Lymond, you started this. For all of the good qualities of Lymond, why the hell is he doing this? But there is a really nice scene between Lymond and Robin, because Robin is like, this is ridiculous. Yep, see, Robin is correct. But Lymond's like, oh no, but you're my partner, so you're like coming with me? Like, you're my partner. Robin's like, no, please God, no. And then Lymond just sort of stops him halfway through Robin saying, it takes a lot more courage to not do the crazy thing than it does to fall in with her. And Lymond kneels in front of him, holds his hand out and says, friend Robin, come running with me. And then Robin's heart melts and he's sold and he goes. And I understand this. If Lymond knelt in front of me and called me a friend and extended his hand, I would do anything he said. But Lymond in this moment must be feeling so bad, because how can he not? Lymond has literally manipulated Robin to the point of putty, and now he's just playing with him. Lymond, do you feel bad? I really don't like the picture of Una O'Dwyer sitting alone and unseeing for half that long night in the Hotel Moita before the dead fire. We can all relate to that when we feel like we're annoyed at something and it's all silent and we're stuck with the thoughts of our own head. Una is annoyed at Lymond, who I think she secretly deeply likes, because he has no ambition. And I think that's the reason Una likes it, in the same reason that serious people and non-serious people often get married and are constantly annoyed at each other for being the opposites of each other, but that's why they like each other as well. I feel like that's why Una and Lymond should definitely get married. But Una's never going to admit that to herself, and she's just more, I don't know, there's something else going on with Una. She has to know things. Is she connected with all of the prostitutes of France? Because she mentioned that to Taddy Boy at one point, and we've not seen any of Taddy Boy's network of people at work. Like, back in Game of Kings, we had Johnny Bullo and the gypsies, and then we had Molly and the prostitutes, and they were all like networks for Lymond, and so it made it believable that he knew a lot of stuff that was going on. Where is Taddy Boy's network here? Is it just really the Scottish people and his own comings and goings in the French court? Like, he's his own network. He has to be his own legs this time. I suppose Archie. Right, so now we are up to chapter 5, which is the rooftop chase in Blois. Don't know how to say it. This starts so hilariously because we have, everyone's drunk except for Robin, but we have like the envious drunkenness of Dengen at Robin Stewart, and it was so funny. So Lymond sets fire to Robin Stewart's hat. This is just like, oh my god. Oh my goodness. Like, Lymond, is he drunk? Like, he's, I don't, You can't be that drunk to go over rooftops, okay? So I would say that they're all tipsy. But not only that, as the hat is burning, Dengen comes up. This is one of the Bourbon brothers. The Bourbon brothers, I like that. And flings it into the street, and he's like, set fire to the rest of him, my dear, and drop him below. I literally have written here, OMG. What the hell? Dengen is not a good person. He's not. But I love this interaction. Then Lymond is like, no, Robin's my partner. And Dengen gets super, super possessive and like grips Lymond's shirt all possessively and is like, no, you're racing with me. And says to Lymond, you're very drunk, my dear. So he's called Lymond my dear twice in 2 paragraphs. It's so French, he's so gay, I love it. You're very drunk, my dear, and trust me, those beautiful hands, we must not risk a fall. And so firstly, Dengen is accusing Lymond of being drunk, very drunk, and that makes me think that Lymond is definitely putting on some of that drunkenness and is probably only tipsy at this point. And Lymond just stares back at says, no, find yourself a new lamb dear, which translate to hand god. My hands are only for the fellow among you who has not had a drop in him since supper time, which is a good comeback. I just want to, before we go on, I just want to mention though, Dengen takes Lymond's hands in a way that obviously makes me think they have held each other's hands a lot in the past. Lymond's hands are scarred. Dengen must know that that Taddy Boy is not Taddy Boy. That's all I can think of. I don't think Dengen is dumb. It's actually really hard because in the next paragraph, he literally knocks Robin Stewart down the roof, and literally this could have killed Robin. Like, I'm assuming they were just only like 1 story up, but the wrong fall and the wrong landing kills a person or could maim them. Taddy Boy saves Robin from that fall, not without, some difficulty. Yeah, it definitely makes me think that Taddy Boy is not as drunk as he appears. And he even grazes his palms to save Robin, and looks back at Dengen. And Dengen is standing there, breathing rather hard. So either Dengen is super drunk and jealously horny and just wants to get his hands on Taddy Boy, or he actually is a bad guy and was trying to get rid of Robin Stewart. And now that I'm reading this, I'm kind of going with the super horny option because I kind of want that to be true. And I think if you're a bad guy, don't try to openly murder Robin Stewart like that. That's giving your game away a little bit. And the next paragraph is, of the rest, only St. Andre was clear-headed enough to have noticed. So St. Andre is sober. So, I don't know about this. St. Andre, I was definitely suspicious of last chapter. So I'm still suspicious of St. Andre. Dengen then gives Robin Stewart a 3-word apology. Does he say, I am sorry? And then just goes, and then leaves. To set foot on ground level was to be disqualified, so these are the rules of the rooftop chase. What a great idea, except that I find it totally unbelievable because I looked up pictures of bleu, and the rooftops, they're not flat, they are like steepled. It must snow in this place potentially, so maybe that's why they have to be so steepled. It's not an easy thing to do. I get that they're close together, but these roofs aren't flat. Robin Stewart is like apparently okay. He was just half murdered and just continues on with Taddy Boy. Poor Robin. Oh my god. This whole rooftop chase anyway, there was a moment here where Robin is like chasing after Taddy and his teeth clenched in a splendid schoolboy bravado burning bright in his breast. I can totally relate to this, like that the bravado, the schoolboy, that feeling of like being at one with your fellow friends and the power that you get from being together with your friends. That is just such a perfect explanation of why Robin now suddenly has all this energy, because he feels at one with Taddy Boy, and he has all this bravado and motivation feeding off from Taddy Boy's motivation and Taddy Boy's friendship and being called a friend. He's still struggling with the image of Lymond kneeling before him and stretching out his hands. It's okay, Robin, we understand. Robin becomes Taddy Boy's apprentice Robin Stewart must be very fit and healthy. I don't know why, but I imagined him as not being as fit and healthy as I thought, but he must be young and very fit. He's good at what he does. He's physically very fit to keep up with Taddy Boy. Taddy Boy is asking about how far is Conde behind. Is Lymond worried about Conde? Is that a clue? I honestly don't know who is the bad guy. I am so confused. And I don't want to think too hard about it. I'm just kind of going with it, but I am lost. Lymond says of Conde and Dengen, the two bros, "'Twould be an uneasy day in heaven now if two mortal sinners such as that had the good of it much longer. Do you agree with me, Robin?" He's just saying the angels in heaven are not happy with how easy a life the Bourbon brothers are having. So Lymond knows these Bourbon brothers are not good people, yet sleeps with both of them anyway. He's only human. Lymond is like one of those people who has like given up if he was an angel, he has given up his wings in order to frolic in hell and gain information for the benefit of the angels who retained their wings, but now he can never go live back in heaven himself. This is Lymond's entire life. Still, he's totally happy with frolicking with the devil, so that's cool. Oh my gosh. So, we have lots of rooftop chasing. It was a really funny moment when the Bourbon brothers are like trying to get information and bribing, because they have no charisma and they have no tact. They only have their money, which is not true. They definitely have charisma and tact, but they are getting pissed off at this point and they offer money to this guy to get the next clue. And one of them is like, "Louis, I have no money, idiot." So Louis is actually the first name of the Prince of Conde. I did not know that. They're just so angry at each other because they're brothers, so they have grown up fighting and they probably should not be on the same team for that very reason. I had theories about what the hell was going on, but then I kind of got lost and I don't know who won and it was very confusing, but I don't think that was the point anyway. The point was there's probably a lot to read into this about different people's characters with how they went about this, and St. Andre obviously was very ambitious. The two Bourbon brothers were like also ambitious but just kind of bitchy. Lawrence de Gensten was involved, and so we need to just watch St. Andre, I guess. Lymond says to Robin, "I told Dengen you were worth 10 of him." Whether or not that is true, I don't know, but that's a very manipulative thing to say, Lymond, if it wasn't true. And even if you did say it to Dengen, also still very manipulative. But here's the thing, it's because at this point, Lymond was about to fall from a height which could have killed him, and Robin made a quick move in order to save Lymond, but his quick move put Robin himself in danger. And the thing is that Lymond kind of knew that would be the case. Lymond knew that if he was partners with Dengen and was in trouble, Dengen probably wouldn't have risked his own neck to save Lymond. And so knowing that, Lymond chose Robin Stewart as his partner, knowing that he had someone he could rely on. So yeah, basically Lymond knows that Robin Stewart had his back. So yeah, from this I can definitely think that Lymond has a really low opinion of both of the Bourbon brothers. And we should pay attention to that. There's probably a bunch of other clues that I've missed in this. Why they were all so keen to win? I have no idea. I'm never going to understand. Robin Stewart then is like, at the end of all of this, "I'll come back with you to Ireland." And Lymond must have probably not been too shocked, but his reaction is, if you wish to. I guess Lymond knows that it doesn't matter what he promises at this point, because like eventually the truth is going to have to come out and Robin Stewart will figure things out. So sure, promise that in the moment, but at this point Lymond is probably hating himself for this like entire cocoon of lies that he's in, that he's just like, what's another one? But it must feel really empty for him to continue to lie to Robin at this point, especially after Robin has proven that he saved Taddy Boy's life at one point during that chase. Then Lymond goes to visit Jenny Fleming, and we finally have like a scene with some plot. We find out that Jenny Fleming's room is not guarded, and that it often isn't guarded. That Jenny Fleming is pregnant with the king's child, that Lymond is extremely pissed off. The violence of his disengagement staggered her. Strong wine and stretched muscles disregarded, Lymond strode to the window and stayed there, gripping his anger hard until he could speak. We've seen Lymond unleash his anger on people, but he never does it to women, almost ever. But he does get verbally annoyed at Jenny. I guess I was kind of annoyed. Like, he's annoyed at Jenny for getting pregnant to the king and like leaving the room unguarded. That's completely fair. That could have been avoided, and it was really careless. And Jenny's like, but it's fine. I'm gonna like work my way up the ranks, and it'll make it safer. And obviously, it's just another representation of how naive Jenny is in her thinking. She's never really had to think properly about this kind of stuff because she's had everything that she needed in life. But I also am kind of annoyed how Lymond's annoyed at Jenny and the woman and not annoyed at the king. I mean, I guess it's hard to be annoyed at the king because the king can't do any wrong, but like, there are two people in this. Lymond, get annoyed at the king too, okay? Lymond then basically says, you're not going to knock Diane de Portes off her pedestal, it's not going to happen. And Jenny's like, no, like, it's all good, it'll be fine. And Lymond's like, do you think I'm dumb? Like, do you think I don't know exactly how the arrangements at court are, how they run? At this point, then Lymond basically proves a point to Jenny by the little sweets that they'd made, goes to the boxes, picks up the bottom box, and goes to give it to a dog to see if it will kill the dog, to see if the arsenic has been sprinkled on there. Honestly, I know that we find out that the dog does die and that these were poisoned, but I just felt like that was a long shot. He picked the one box that it was, and I don't know, it was kind of crazy. I suppose if you're going to poison any box, you want to poison one that you know you can pick out easily, so it would be the bottom one, because no one would suspect that being the case, and you would always know which one you've done because it was the bottom one if you had to suddenly reverse it. Like, let's say that you were invited to the room to eat the sweetmeats and you were the murderer and you'd sprinkled arsenic, you'd want to know which box you put it in, right? But still seemed a long shot. There is a really, of all Jenny Fleming's lack of insightfulness, there is one comment she makes that I think really touches Lymond, and that is this, and this is on the bottom of page 167. The romantic trappings of leadership are hard to give up, are they not, Francis? So basically, she's basically saying, are you serious? You really think this is poisoned? Come on, like, this is foolish. You've got no shadow of proof that this has been touched. And then her voice softens, and then she says this line, the romantic trappings of leadership are hard to give up, are they not, Francis? So basically here, I think Jenny's saying to Francis, I know that you really want to be a leader and not necessarily a pawn in this game. And it's really hard for you to cope with the fact that right now you are a pawn and that you're not leading. Like, Francis has had a taste at leadership in many ways, and he genuinely wants to be able to control people and lead people, I think. But he doesn't have the ability to do that right now with his position. And when he has a chance to, he jumps at it. So I think, yeah, Jenny's saying to Francis, like, it's kind of cute that you're trying to, like, be a leader and all, and it's cute that you're, like, bursting in here and telling me all of this stuff about all the bad stuff that I've done and putting the Queen Mary at danger, but, like, maybe you're just missing being a leader. Like, which is, although she wasn't saying like that, she was sort of softening and saying like, maybe you really just, this isn't the right place for you, and maybe you should go back and be a leader elsewhere. And then she's like, I don't want to quarrel. And Lymond's like, are we quarreling? And then they kiss, and then like she just comes forward, asks for forgiveness. She laid her hand, endearingly young, on his steady arm. She's in her mid-30s. I'm so glad that that Dunnett is not calling a woman in her 30s old and expired. Thank you, Dunnett. That's not a personal comment that I made at all. Then she slid her fingers up and, drawing him gently downwards, kissed him full on the mouth. Jenny has been wanting to do that for a very long time. But also, I can't get out of my head. He's literally been described as like sweaty and smelling like wine. He's just spent hours over a rooftop. Like, go wash your face, Lymond. He can't though, because he's got like dye all everywhere. Oh, he must never shower, Lymond. This whole time he must hate it. And Lymond does not kiss her back. She's like all warm and loving and like got her arms around her, and she's just like, he's just like sitting there like a stone. Then Lymond steps back and says, I ceased discriminating a long time ago. Do you mean discriminating about quarreling? Is that what he means? And then Lymond goes back out, and the guards kind of ignore him because Teddy Boy's nocturnal habits were nothing new, and ignorance at the court was often best. So we now have proof that Lymond visits many people in the middle of the night. And as Lymond gets back to his own room where? His own wing in the King's Court? So he has his own wing? Lymond has his own wing in the King's Court, and he brought all of his lovers back to like Oleamro's own room? What the hell? So as he's going back to his own wing, he blundered once blindly, crossing a passage. What does that mean? He just stumbles? So like, he's just walking by himself, and finally, because he doesn't have to impress anyone or like show strength in front of anyone, he just almost falls over. That is the cutest thing ever, Lymond. Also the saddest thing. Oh my gosh. Before he goes in, he's just like resting, and for a moment looked neither brutal nor romantic nor indifferent. So what the hell do you look like if you're not brutal nor romantic nor indifferent? Concerned? Yes, he's concerned because he expected Oleamro there, but it was not Oleamro. It was Peter Dooley. So he's probably a little bit relieved that it was just Peter Dooley. We never see Peter Dooley in this entire thing. We finally get him to hear him speaking. So this is kind of out of the blue. I was like, what? We never, has he even said a single word, Peter Dooley? Maybe a little bit. I feel like we needed a bit more before we suddenly got this whole 2 pages worth. Anyway, Peter Dooley, we find out now, that wasn't quite indifferent to Taddy Boy's real identity. Peter Dooley is very loyal to Oleamro, which we find out here, which is quite nice. Tells Lymond that Oleamro has been injured by a bunch of people who were wrestlers. I'm assuming that these wrestlers have assumed that Oleamro is actually Lymond. So at this point, we can now assume that people are trying to kill Lymond and they still think that Lymond is Oleamro. And then Lord Fleming, whoever the hell, comes knocking at the door where Lymond and Peter Dooley are. Lord Fleming is Margaret's brother, so what's his name? We don't get a name. He's just called Lord Fleming. Lord Fleming says the dog is dead. And Lymond kind of just like, and then says that, oh yeah, like my mother is like upset, exceedingly upset. So Jenny Fleming, and I believe this, I reckon she, after the dog is dead, is probably actually genuinely freaking out, because not only would Queen Mary have died, but like she would have also killed a bunch of other children because they were all eating this, and she herself probably would have died as well. And then he's like, she's asking what to do, and Lymond is like, tell her to burn them. I'll do the rest. So they're going to burn them. They're going to hide the evidence. Lymond! Oh my gosh. So they're going to hide the evidence of the boxes having anything in them, like by burning them. And are they going to pretend that they just... How are they going to hide that? Because what they need to do is they now need to hide the fact that they know someone's trying to kill Queen Mary. Otherwise, that's going to put the killer on high alert and maybe make them more aggressive or harder to find. So like, at this point, they kind of need to just act as if nothing has happened. But he's saying, burn them? No. And then Peter Dooley, he says to Peter Dooley, tell O'Liam I wish him Godspeed for what it's worth. So he's not going to go back to O'Liam and have a chat before he leaves. O'Liam is not going to like that. And then Lymond says, there have been enough scapegoats. From this time, I'll be my own bait. I don't think Lymond's planning to give up his own identity. I think he's just planning to get O'Liam out of here. If Lymond gives up his own identity, like he can't, because I know for a fact that they're going to England after this, and Lymond can't be Francis of Crawford in England because there's a lot of people that really, really don't like him. Although I kind of want him to be Francis of Crawford in England because there's a lot of people who really, really don't like him, and I would love to see that. But he can't. And then he goes to sleep. We have so many chapters that just end in Lymond just falling asleep, exhausted. It's like a theme. The theme of the book is every third chapter, Lymond has to be exhausted and go to sleep. A little bit unbelievable to me that Lymond is so tired that he can barely make it to his bed. Yet 5 minutes prior was talking with Jenny Fleming and figuring out that there was arsenic in one of these sweet treats. And then an hour prior was like getting drunk with, well, I suppose if he is quite drunk at the moment, then that could hit him. But how is he drunk and had this conversation? He's so good at the mental, he's good at resisting the mental effects of wine because he physically can take it, I guess. But the physical effects of his body processing all that alcohol is like gonna wear him down eventually. Great chapters. I'm very excited to read on. It definitely feels like we're getting into lots of action, and I'm so excited to see what's gonna happen left. I'm really enjoying this book. It is a little bit more confusing with regards to still what on earth Lymond is doing, because it just seems a little bit all over the place, but I still really enjoy it and the interactions. And it's so crazy how we can have such small snippets of interactions, but because they're built on lots and lots of little lines that Dunnett has put in through the book, it feels like a huge, big, sprawling picture of characters and setting, even though we really don't get actually much interaction one-on-one between these characters. Like, this is the first real interaction one-on-one between Jenny Fleming and Lymond that we've seen. So, very clever. I will see you soon. Bye.